Here's how to get in touch with us tonight.
This is BBC 5 Live. Call free 08085 909 693.
Here's how to get in touch with us tonight.
This is BBC 5 Live. Call free 08085 909 693.
Here's how to get in touch with us tonight. Chris is on the line tonight. Evening to you, Chris.
Good evening, Stephen. I'm okay, but I was just completely lost what I was hearing about 5-10 minutes ago.
Why's that, Chris?
I was hearing a counsellor say, right, that finding people attractive or having a certain type of person attractive is old-fashioned.
Начали все такое.
Yeah, that was Seamus Tafoicha, the SDLP councillor in Northern Ireland. Yeah.
I'm sorry, isn't it about being human, just judging human beings by how we are? Shouldn't we be allowed to do whatever we like as adults about our own particular feelings towards other human beings, as long as we don't hurt them? Isn't that how relationships develop? That we need to see something about a person and think, well, they're my type, they're attractive. Why
you heard
people using Zoom? I cannot, right now, people would be using Zoom and they're looking at people all the time. And you're telling me you're not allowed to type to find attractive, according to this person?
That's what he was telling you.
What world is he living in? Does he understand what human beings really are? Seriously. What is he trying to do? Change us? More social engineering?
Well,
give me a break.
What Seamus was saying was, look, there's a lot more to a human being than physicality. And that having a type, these were his words, is old-fashioned. You shouldn't have a type, he said.
That's ridiculous. Human beings are human beings, and we develop relationships by certain people we can get on with, certain people we can't. Just because they're human, not because of their type, not because of their sex, their race.
Well, that's what he's saying. That's what he's saying.
I know. I could not believe it, Stephen. I am utterly gobsmacked. Human beings are human beings. This is what we do.
Well, I know, but you just keep repeating that. But do you not think, Chris, that you have the potential to fall in love with someone who you might not feel at first glance is physically attractive, but you like them as a person, their values, their personality?
Well, yeah, you can get on with people if you kind of meet them and you understand a little bit. What I'm saying is you're not allowed a type. Is wrong. To have a type that is an old-fashioned premise or anything else is wrong. That's totally wrong. We are allowed to like people of a certain type. But what we do, you will get on with certain people from a certain group and others you might not get on with. Right? See people of a certain look you find attractive. We develop that. Some people have another type of look, we don't find them attractive. But we don't hate on them. Right? It's just the way we are as human beings. I just thought that was common sense, what we do. And this guy's saying you can't have a type. Come on.
You sound angry about this.
I am. I think it's pathetic. It's absolutely pathetic, the way he is. You're having people like that on the show with just lunatic ideas of what human beings are in an emotional and relationship creature.
He's entitled to have his view without you being pejorative, surely, Chris.
Most people.
He's not another. He's got a different view from you, and he does not. And he thinks it's old-fashioned to be sexually attracted to a particular type.
That's wrong. Well, I find that
You sound like you can't breathe.
I find it ridiculous. I just find it ridiculous. That's all. That you can actually say that to us and expect us to sort of like go, what, really? Not allowed to have a type of person we're attracted to now because it's old-fashioned. Excuse me? Just because something's old-fashioned doesn't make it wrong anyway.
Stay there, Chris. Let's see what Johnny in Lancashire thinks. 08085 909 693. Go ahead, Johnny.
Hiya, Stephen. I'm going to call you Colin then. It's all right.
Yeah, I'm just. What if
Well,
you
he's getting all the trails at the minute, so why not call me Colin too?
All right, call you Colin. All right, Colin.
There we go.
All right. Look, what infuriates me about this argument about, transsexuals, transvestites, they always keep getting it mixed up. Far as it's seen, it's a person, a personality. You understand the personality, the thought in your head, not the body, is in a wrong body. Now, if you want to discriminate against that, you shouldn't do, because that's what it's all about. Do you understand that?
Well, the conversation that we're having now, Johnny,
a female or a man.
the conversation we're having.
And I've met people like this, and they're quite okay. You don't discriminate them, you don't hate them, you just respect.
Old-fashioned to be sexually attracted to a particular type. That you shouldn't have a particular type.
We mean heterosexual, attracted to a man and a female and all that.
Yes.
Well, that's been proven in history to be wrong in that sense. It's what you out. If you are attracted to another person and it's not a sexual attraction like lust, and that's part of it. If you're strongly heterosexual that way, then you're going to be attracted to whatever you feel at the time. But if you're ancient Greeks, they didn't mind all this. There was this discrimination. In history, it's sort of proven. In India, there's heterosexual men attracted to men who are looking like women. What is wrong with all people out there? Just leave people to be attracted to whoever they want to be attracted to, and show no discrimination. It's as simple as that.
Seamus de Foytje is saying it's old-fashioned to have a particular type. That you should be open-minded, Johnny. That you might think you have a type. I don't know. You might be
old-fashioned.
Hold on.
There's no
Hear me out.
Old-fashioned. It's
Hear me out. Hear me out. This man can't hear me. Hear me out.
Yeah, go on.
So what our guest was saying was that you might think that you are attracted to a particular type, which may be a man, a woman, someone with red hair, black hair, blonde hair, whatever. De Foytje is saying that's old-fashioned. Actually, Johnny, you should be open-minded, and you might be attracted to a trans, to a man, to a heterosexual, homosexual, whatever.
Is that what he's saying?
Yes.
But that's not going to happen like that.
Well, you don't know, according to him.
Oh, no.
You're being old-fashioned, according to
that score, and it's showing, to be thinking, there will be people who are heterosexuals or who will be attracted to the others, and it'll probably be because they've aligned their mind like that to think for that time, or it might, they might feel that that's something what they want to experiment at, and it might not be suitable for them to do it again. It's all, you've got to be sometimes you've got to say, it's what's in that person. If they want to do that, that's okay. That's part of life, isn't it?
Won't be that way. Chris?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Still here.
Hey.
Well, point, I agree with you. You should be allowed to be attracted to who you want. Okay?
Well, that's obvious, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, you should never show
be
discrimination to other groups like gay men or lesbians and other people. And there's people who probably want to, a married man he's got a wife, he might go off and go to a man.
That's really cheap.
And he might
what we're talking about here is the attraction.
Ever after. There's all sorts of things happening out there, but we shouldn't have where we have a roadblock that you can't do this or you can't be like that.
Sorry,
it's about freedom.
You can't be called old-fashioned. Being called old-fashioned because you have a type of person you're attracted to is ridiculous.
That is
your attitude is
ridiculous in that sense, to be called old-fashioned, even to be called old-fashioned about morality or something you feel about. But it don't mean to say there's a formula in being old-fashioned. You've got to be religious or you've got to go to church. That's old-fashioned. No, old-fashioned, it's just an easy word to use to categorize a certain person. That's nonsense.
Listen, Johnny, thank you very much indeed.
Is that okay? All right.
Thank you.
See you
Thank you,
next
Chris.
time.
Thank
Good evening, Chris.
Good
Thank
evening.
you.
Good evening to you too. Bye-bye.
I know. It's 12:15. 08085 909 693 is our number. Now, we've been talking a lot about face masks recently and how, according to the experts, you should wear them to protect others. My next guest believes we should also be wearing face masks to protect ourselves, as breathing in a small amount of virus may lead to no disease or a more mild infection. Dr. Monica Gandhi is Professor of Medicine at the University of California in San Francisco and Medical Director of the HIV Clinic at Zuckerberg San Francisco General Hospital.
I think when we first started talking about masks, we may have messaged it that they were only protective for other people. And I do not believe that, and I think evidence is accumulated.
Yo! Glad to see you tonight. Yeah. Типа,
This huge
ночь
advantage.
будет еще
What
та.
research are you basing this upon?
So the evidence for masks protecting
И
you
вообще
are
я
based
рад
on sort of
всех
three
видеть,
levels
кто еще не
of
спит.
research, three levels of
Или
evidence,
кто
and
уже
putting
не
it all
спит.
together. One is
Или
basic
кто вообще даже и не
virology. It's
ложился,
been
и
known
для тех
since
даже,
1938 with the
кто
first
даже
study
только что
that the
встал.
more virus you get into your system, the more
Для
sick
тех, кто
you get.
находится вообще в другом
And that
часовом
is
поясе.
in many, many animal models, but then even
У
some
меня
human
уже
models, meaning we have
глубокая
given
вообще.
people non-lethal viruses.
Поэтому
and
болтать мне
influenza A
очень
specifically,
и очень
if
не
you give them
хочется.
more people more
Поэтому
influenza
давайте
A, they get
договоримся,
more sick. And if you give them a
что я
little bit, they
сегодня
get a
не
little
буду
bit sick.
болтать.
And then there was a study
Пускай
just a couple
болтает
of months
радио.
ago in clinical infectious diseases with hamsters,
Выплата по
because we can't
кредиту.
give humans, by the way, like
Кровопийца-то.
little and big doses of
Запомните.
COVID virus because it's not ethical. But in hamsters, they
Все банки,
simulated
которые выдают
with
кредиты,
surgical mask
кровопийцы.
partition masking, and the hamsters who were masked were less
Всё,
likely
ладно.
to get COVID at all.
Пускай
But if
радио
they got
болтает.
it, they got very
А мне
mild
неохота.
infection.
Вы уж не обижайтесь.
The second piece of evidence is kind of outbreak investigation. So if you look at outbreaks in settings where people were masked, there's a very high rate of asymptomatic infection. Like a cruise ship, for example, there are two cruise ships. One, no one was masked because we didn't know about it, and the rate of not having symptoms was 20%. And another cruise ship, everyone got a mask. They still didn't let them off, but everyone got a mask. All the passengers got surgical masks, and all the staff got N95 masks, and the rate of asymptomatic infection, not having symptoms, was 81%, so much, much higher. And then this has been shown in meat processing plants. So they have outbreaks, but if they're masking, the rate of asymptomatic infection is 95%. And then the final piece of evidence is country
So you're
level
doing this.
evidence.
You're doing this too quickly for my brain. So the you really are. So the rate of asymptomatic infection was higher in those people who were wearing masks. Is that right?
Correct. So if you are wearing masks, and if the whole population on a closed setting like a cruise ship or in a plant are wearing masks, the rate of having no symptoms of COVID-19, even if you get infected, is very high. 80% up to 95%. But the CDC estimates
But surely it
that
doesn't
our
matter whether you have
society-
symptoms. Hold on. Surely it doesn't matter whether you have symptoms, Monica. It matters whether you've got it or not. So why are you
Well-
putting store in? That's what's confusing me.
Yes, I'll tell you why. Because if you don't have symptoms, what is the horrible thing about COVID-19? The horrible thing is severe illness, going into the hospital, going into the ICU, and dying. These are the terrible things about COVID-19. This is what is distinguishing COVID-19 from a common cold. And it is why the entire planet sick. Hospitals don't get flooded. And it's a very simple intervention, putting a mask over your face to drive down the inoculum that you're exposed to and to be more likely to have no symptoms of infection.
So what you're saying to me is, for those people who get it, who were wearing a mask, the mask has stopped enough of the viral load getting into the system that the body is not overwhelmed. In layman's terms, am I getting that right?
That is correct. That is exactly what it is. And that's in animal models, in human models, and we've seen it in outbreaks, and we've seen it even at country level data that populations that mask have had less death and severe illness than populations that do not mask.
And now tell me about that percentage now that I understand that. Tell me about that percentage again.
So the two examples that I'll give is, I'll first talk about the cruise ship outbreak with the Diamond Princess that got so much attention. The first outbreak we had on a cruise ship, the rate of not having symptoms when no one was masking was 18%. 82% of people got sick. Then in another cruise ship outbreak going around Argentina, they still didn't let people off, but they had an outbreak on this cruise ship, but they gave everyone masks. And the rate of not having symptoms was 81%. So only 20%, 19% of people got sick at all.
So it turned on its head.
Then,
Mask, in that example, it completely turned on its head.
Correct. They're exactly the opposite proportion, in fact. And then another good example, there was an outbreak in a Tyson meat packing plant in Arkansas 2 weeks ago in the United States. They'd given all the workers masks because you got to give people masks. This is going to make them work in a tight conditions like a meat packing plant. And they had an outbreak, but 95% of people were asymptomatic, had no symptoms. So only 5% of people became ill. And that is true at a country level. What I mean by that is that we can say all the Asian countries knew how to mask. So Thailand, Vietnam, Singapore, Hong Kong, Japan, there was really good masking and really low rates of death. But in your own continent, the Czech Republic, I always think about the Czech Republic because on March 23rd, there was a national mask mandate. Everyone had to mask. Everyone was told to mask quite early. March 23rd was quite early. And everyone masked, and their death rate was so low. And when they opened up, they'd see cases, but not illness. And then by May 11th, they said, fine, you can take off your mask. And they have had 352 deaths total.
So if that is the case, how come I have spent months on the radio with pretty high-level, educated medical professionals telling me that the efficiency and effectiveness of masks was in dispute? The jury was out.
I think that there was not enough data at the beginning to put it all together. I think what happened was everyone was making assumptions and they knew that it would protect others. So they just wanted to be safe and say that. And now the evidence is really coming together and it's very overwhelming that it protects you as well. And that is why this is a fundamentally important study to cover, an important principle to cover, because we have to appeal to people's, sense of kind of self-protection. And it helps someone, if they think it's protecting them, to wear their mask. And wearing your mask in places that maybe don't have the same civic duty, feeling of civic duty, and I'll name the United States as one of those places, wearing that mask that I think will get us through this pandemic, which is facial masking.
Does it matter what the material is? Does it matter what type of mask it is?
So that's a very good question. So there has never been a study where we have taken human beings and put a mask on them and given them SARS-CoV-2, the virus that causes COVID, and try out different materials because it would be too dangerous. It's the same reason that we don't give them higher, lower doses. So extrapolating kind of from other literature, which is very hard to extrapolate, all masks, and I mean even simple cloth masks, filter out the majority of viral particles. I cannot tell you exactly the percentage. I can tell you that N95 masks filter out more, and the cloth and surgical isolation masks probably filter out absolutely the majority, but I cannot give you an exact percentage. And filtering out the majority is all you need. You don't want to get sick. And by the way, if you get an asymptomatic infection and you get some immunity from that, that's even better. And that we have to study.
Oh, now that's interesting as well. So what you're saying about that is, look, if you get a mask and the mask stops enough of the virus getting into you that you don't get sick, but you might have got the virus, then in itself, you've then built up immunity as well. Is that what you're saying?
So that's the dream, that's the hope.
Yeah.
What is the
But we're not
evidence
sure
around
how
that?
long
Well,
immunity actually stays in the human body for. That's those T cells, isn't it?
Yes, so that's exactly right. We actually have a grant pending at the NIH to study this very question. You're absolutely right that you just hit on the point. It's T cells and not antibodies, right? So viral infections, the protective adaptive immune response is cell-mediated or T cell immunity as opposed to the antibodies. So I think we need to downplay the antibodies a bit. So going back to T cell immunity, that is exactly the question, that how much and how long do you get immunity with asymptomatic infection, and can that protect us as we're waiting for a vaccine? Now, I'll give you some hopeful, tantalizing elements that we may get immunity from asymptomatic infection, which is that one piece of evidence is that there are small studies that show T cells coming up with asymptomatic infection. Got to have more of those studies. And the second is we haven't had very much reinfection with this virus, right? Like, let's admit it, we've had this virus circulating for 8 months and counting. And we have had very few reinfections that have actually been deeply characterized. And there's certainly anecdotal reports, and there may have been people who have had reinfections. We can't say that's not true, but it seems like it's not a massive phenomenon. And this many people have had it, this much virus circulating, and we're not seeing reinfections. That's hopeful. That's hopeful for a degree of immunity from even mild disease.
Listen, I think you're explaining things in a real clear way, and I'm really appreciative of you being on with us tonight. Just a few more questions. How long do we need to be to us? So there are some people thinking that, look, you actually need to be in contact with someone who is infected for a prolonged period of time before they will get it, before they can be infected by it. Is that true?
It depends on, I believe, the masking or not. So, for example, the CDC defines close contact with someone as 15 minutes. That's a long time, actually. There's a debate going on whether masking changes that or not. I believe masking does. And so if masking changes that, then maybe you have to be exposed for longer if you're not masked and for shorter if you are. In terms of how long you truly to be exposed, this is hard to determine right now because you cannot do these experiments. And so it is hard to tell, which is why the reason for masking is, think about the phrase universal precautions. The universal precautions for us in medicine means that we assume everyone's infected. And you go into a patient's room and you just assume they're infected with like anything you can get, blood, respiratory, and you protect yourself from the possibility of everyone being infected. And that's why it's not like certain selective populations masking. The behavior change here is population level masking. It's a huge thing to ask, but many countries have done it in the setting of this pandemic. So it is, you're assuming, and then it no longer becomes relevant in a way. You're just assuming and you have a mask.
In any government, given the statistics you've discussed, would you be surprised by any government who is not making the wearing of masks mandatory?
this far into the pandemic, I am convinced of the power of population-level masking, and I would be surprised by any government that does not make this a mandate. And so that's what I would encourage the U.S. government to do, and that's what I would encourage all governments that are still struggling with the virus to do.
And to repeat again, in basic layman's terms, for those people, Monica, who are going out to the shops tomorrow and they're deciding whether they will wear a mask or not, what is the likelihood increase statistically in them not getting this virus if they wear a mask? Spell it out one more time to them.
The risk with it, that is hard to tell in humans. I think it can reduce your level of not getting it down to 40. And that's a study from Germany. And then put it down even further if you want to get it, but without any symptoms. I think maybe it's very hard to quantitate, but I'm going to say 75% chance that you won't even feel it. You won't get any symptoms. Boy, that would be a huge advantage. You don't want to get sick. No one wants to get sick.
It's also, if we think about it, we've been talking tonight about vulnerable people with underlying health conditions. My goodness,
Correct.
if they listened to you, they wouldn't want to be around anyone without a mask, would they? And they wouldn't want to not be
No.
wearing a mask themselves.
No, it is the duality of both wearing masks. One model showed that 80% of the population has to wear masks to get down to 0 deaths, even if there's no lockdown. 0 deaths with 80% of the population. That was the model. So, boy, I mean, 0 deaths with the pandemic. If we can get through it, let's get through it with masking. The CDC director said, everyone puts on a mask right now. I think we can get through this pandemic, even in this mess of the United States, by 4, 6, or 8 weeks from now. So I see zero reason to quibble about it in your mind. It's going to protect you.
Well, there's no chance of America getting through this. It's not going to be over in 6 or 8 weeks.
Director said it. He literally said it 2 weeks ago. He said, if everyone put on a mask, this is the power of the mask. This is our CDC director who said this. We could get through it if we mask. This is, I think, how powerful it is to cover up the hole, the nose and the mouth, from which viral shedding occurs and from which virus is ingested. It's a very powerful tool.
So you think it's credible that this could be over in your country in 8 weeks if everyone wore a mask? That sounds unbelievable.
I think it is credible. I believe it when he said that. I think it's credible from the evidence. I think what isn't credible is that 80% of the population in this country at this moment will mask, and it is time to do that.
Well, really interesting stuff, isn't it? If you want to react to that, 08085 909 693. I think Joyce in Newcastle's doing just that, actually. Hello, Joyce.
Hello, Mr. Nolan. Yes.
Hello there. So you're pro-mask?
I'm a great advocate of masks. As I was telling the chappies, I'm 76. I'm in the vulnerable category. I have no family, and so I had to do everything myself. And I've worn a mask from day one, and I've been to the shops, the metro, the buses, and because I can only carry little bits of shopping at a time, I was going out 4 times a week, and so far so good, you know. And I think the mask has protected me from people breathing on us, really.
It makes you feel safe.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I feel safe. I wouldn't go into the shops without a mask. And I just can't understand people who, I mean, it's given spots. I don't like wearing it, but rather than get COVID, you know, I'd wear it. Yeah. And I can't understand people who say, well, I'm not wearing a mask. It's ridiculous.
And of course, part of the point, Joyce, is when these people wear masks, it's protecting not just themselves, but others around them, like you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm only 5 foot, so people above me are always breathing down on it, you know. Yeah, and I mean, the shops, Tesco's and everything, the shops are quite crowded now, so you're shoulder to shoulder. There's no distancing. You just can't distance in Tesco's or any shop. But I keep my mask on, and as I say, so far so good, touch wood.
Have you
You know,
found
I'm
things
I'm
difficult?
76. If I get it, I'll snuff it.
Have you found things difficult, Joyce?
What? Wearing a mask, you mean?
Just the whole pandemic.
Yes, I've been absolutely. It's been absolutely horrendous. I have no family. I've got no relations, and I've been completely on my own. And it's driven us round the bend, really. You know. But I mean, what can you do? There's a lot of people in the same boat.
Well, listen, thank you very much indeed, Joyce, for
Okay, thank
talking
you.
to us
Take
tonight.
care.
Stay safe. Thank you very much. Same to you. Thank you. Now, police in Seattle have arrested 45 people after a day of intense clashes with protesters. A number of demonstrators and officers were injured. About 5,000 people joined the protest, part of a nationwide movement to show solidarity with the daily anti-racism demonstrations that have been taking place in Portland, Oregon. Sergio Olmos is a freelance journalist in Portland who's been reporting in the middle of the protests. Good evening.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I was watching the footage this morning, actually, when I woke up on some of the live feeds on the internet, and it is astonishing to see the streets of America, the roads, the highways, with armed police officers in open warfare with citizens. It's astonishing.
Yeah, I should say, this is a very small part of Portland where this is happening. It's not even the whole of downtown, just a part of downtown. So if you were to open up like your maps on your phone and look at Portland, it's about half the size of your pinky. In the streets of Portland, throwing tear gas, using impact munitions on crowds. And last night in particular, you saw activists with umbrellas moving forward in a kind of phalanx towards the courthouse while federal officers threw tear gas and impact munitions their way. And there's an absurdity there that, these activists are facing down federal officers with assault rifles using umbrellas.
There's also an absurdity, though, in the blame being levelled at those officers who are standing in the street. They've got families too. They've got to go home to their wives, their husbands, their children. And the level of abuse being levelled at them for something that's nothing to do with them.
Yeah, so last night, for example, there was a protester shining a light in a federal officer's face. And the federal officer, kind of looked away for about 5 minutes, maybe 5-6 minutes. And then finally, another officer came up and wasn't liking it, took the flashlight out of the protester's hands, and a scuffle ensued. That's kind of a microcosm of how this all is happening. Protesters are throwing water bottles, they're shining lights at officers' eyes, they're shining lasers, which can be harmful to the eyes. But, it should be said, in return, federal officers are throwing, very large amounts of tear gas and using impact munitions. And some of these impact munitions, have sent people to the hospital with head wounds.
Maxine Bernstein's listening to this, covers law enforcement at federal court for the Oregonian. Maxine, good evening.
Good evening. Thanks for having me.
Good evening. Are those officers acting within the law in how they're trying to control those protesters?
That's a very good question, and that's been raised repeatedly in a number of lawsuits that have been filed here in federal court, challenging their aggressive response to these protests that often devolve into violence late at night. And the federal officers contend, and the Homeland Security Secretary repeatedly cites federal law under the Homeland Security Act of 2002 that gives the Secretary the power, federal agents as part of this Federal Protective Service, to safeguard federal government buildings such as this federal courthouse, and to deputize other officers to do the same. And they can carry firearms under the law. They can conduct investigations on or off the property that look into suspected people who are causing or trying to damage the courthouse or harm officers. Yet, many in the state, including the Oregon Attorney General, contend that these federal officers are going well beyond their legal authority. In many cases, they've, at the end of the evening, towards the end of the evening, even into early morning hours, they've declared the demonstration an unlawful assembly or riot, and they've fired tear gas into the crowd and impact munitions, and then they've forcefully pressed the crowd to move away from the courthouse, and they have entered the street, the park across the street, and moved several blocks to press the crowd away. And a lot of legal experts say that that activity appears as if they're becoming the domestic police, and that goes well beyond the legal authority. So that will be before the court.
Sergio, what do you think is going to bring this to an end? These protests?
I don't know. I really couldn't say, and really anybody can't predict what's going to happen day to day down there. What we saw early on was numbers of 10,000 protesters. Numbers died down, and then once the federal officers arrived, numbers swelled back up to early protest day levels. We saw something like 3,000 to 4,000 yesterday. So it's hard to tell. Every night has its own like dynamics to it.
And for you, Maxine,
yeah, I think that even I think it is hard to tell, but they were quieting down somewhat before the enhanced federal presence in Portland, and since there were more federal officers, the numbers have just grown. There were about apparently it was one of the largest in recent weeks, about 5,000 demonstrators last night. Now, early on in the demonstrations, there were marches on the bridge, marches at different parks and rallies, and some members of the black community in Portland have felt that this late-night group is somewhat co-opting the Black Lives Matter.
We're going to have to leave it there, Maxine. Maxine and Sergio, thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Because I want to bring you a final discussion tonight. A Conservative MP has called for an urgent review into claims the Department for Overseas Development paid £71 million in aid to China and £300 million to India. The UK hasn't paid China a penny in bilateral aid since 2011 and nothing to India since 2015. So why is overseas aid still controversial? I've been speaking to Karen Harradine from the Conservative Woman website and Nick Dearden, the director of the campaign group Global Justice.
What I wanted to say is that even though DFID has stopped Chinese bilateral aid in 2011, it now still flings millions of pounds to the Chinese government in the name of partnership. The current budget is standing at $25.7 million. This finances lots of projects, including partnering with the China Development Bank, which is owned by the Chinese government. So DFID can say that they stop bilateral aid, but they give aid by other means.
Nick Dearden?
I think it all depends what it's for. And look, I don't defend every bit of aid that's spent by any manner of means. I think far, far too much aid is actually about our own national interest. It's about, pushing money into British business. It's about big accountancy firms pushing money into the City of London and so on and so forth. So I'm all for criticising those bits of aid that need criticising. I don't necessarily think it's a problem that money is spent in India, particularly because there's a huge amount of poverty in India, of course. So, it depends what it's going on.
It's a problem if some of the money ends up in the hands of warlords or corrupt officials.
Absolutely. I would say, Linda Pullman writes about that in her book on war games, that, a lot of these refugee camps and aid places, you have a lot of tribal warlords, or you have, suspect people going into these camps and giving the aid that is available to those who support their particular political cause or their own regime, etc., etc. So the money doesn't get to who it's needed to get to, and that is one of the biggest problems with foreign aid. A lot of money is unaccountable, and it's used to oppress people, actually.
I mean, look, I don't know the exact details of the aid that you're referring to there. I think it's really unlikely that if it's going to China, it's going to warlords. But, I'm all for reviewing aid. But for me, what aid should be about is building healthcare systems, is building education, is building protection for people. In this country after the Second World War, and I would absolutely agree not enough money is going in that direction, and for me aid should be a far more democratic form of redistribution of wealth at an international level, just as we redistribute wealth in our own country.
But I think the problem is that we're not in a position where we can redistribute our wealth. I mean, Britain is not in a good position, as even though it's a large economy, there are many people who are suffering in our country. Why is it that DFID can justify a multi-million-pound expenditure when only $2 billion is given to councils to alleviate the escalating problem of rough sleeping? Why did the charity Veterans Aid, which helps vulnerable ex-soldiers who have served this country, have to make do with only $500,000 government grants, a fraction of what DFID gives to supernatural organizations like the Gates Foundation or the World Bank or the IMF? If I don't believe in this whole concept that we have to redistribute, I believe in a government taking care of its own people first. And right now, particularly with our thousands of veterans who are homeless on the street, surely they must have priority before anyone else that lives outside our own country.
You'll get no argument from me that the government needs to be spending more on homelessness, absolutely for sure, and health and education in this country. Of course they do. But I think, to be honest, we're one of the richest countries in the world. We have grown rich from extracting wealth from other countries, and we continue to do that through unfair trade deals, through facilitating tax dodging. I mean, my goodness, the richest man in the world made $10 billion last Monday. That's in one day. So there is an enormous amount of money. The problem is we're not taxing it. We're not regulating what big companies do. We need to do that so that we can provide a better life for people in this country and build a more equal country here, but do the same thing around the world.
No, I think the problem is that wanting to, what that actually is a form of paternalism, almost a colonialist outlook, where we are wanting to help others in other countries through money that we spend. I really think Britain might be one of the wealthiest countries in the world, but there's a lot of inequality here that cannot be readdressed just by overtaxing or taxing companies, etc. What has to happen is that money that is wasted by government in organizations like DFID and the bloated salaries of civil servants has to go. We cannot readdress the inequalities in this country by just taxing and taxing and taxing. It doesn't work that way. DFID does far more harm than good. It needs to be totally axed and an emergency budget put aside to help anything else that goes on in the world, a humanitarian disaster, etc. But it's not about overtaxing or taxing. It's about redistributing the tax amount that the government gets. We're actually borrowing
But how
money
else are you going to deal with homelessness in this country then by taxing? I mean, I don't understand what you mean by redistribution in that case.
No, but what you're saying is that we have to tax other companies. This is not about taxing other companies. This is about the government having to borrow money so that is taken from this country and given to others in another country where the money doesn't actually find the way to the poorest people. The money is siphoned off into Swiss bank accounts by the world's worst despots. Foreign aid is a racket.
But hang on, you're just making this up. You're not. What's the proof you've got? What's the proof you've got of this?
I
mean, this has to be based on evidence. I mean, what I would agree with you.
There is evidence. If you let me speak.
Well, hold on. This one at a time, if you don't mind. Okay. There's loads of time for you to talk. Nick, you can finish your point, then Karen, you can come back. Go ahead,
okay.
Nick.
Well, I would like. I mean, I absolutely agree that some aid is wasted. I mean, we did a report a few weeks ago looking at the way that there's a group called CDC Group, which is part of DFID, and it spends money on luxury hotels. It spends money on private schools and private cosmetic surgery hospitals in India, all sorts of awful stuff. So I would absolutely agree with you that should be cut. But I don't necessarily accept that all aid that's being used across the world is falling into the hands of despots and so on. I mean, I just don't think that's true.
I didn't say that. What I'm saying is part of those aids go to despots, and the rest a lot of that money goes into bloated salaries of these organizations like the World Bank. I mean, I've been writing on DFID for 3 years now, and all the articles that I have connect to evidence. And I mean, for example, yes, the CDC, I totally agree with you about that. I mean, it's outrageous that DFID's own bank, the CEO, the CDC, gets an annual salary of £250,000. I mean, that's more. It's just ridiculous that amount of money is given. And for example, the European Commission receives 30% of the DFID budget. Why are we given 30% of our DFID budget to the very wealthy European Commission? Why are we given 20% of our budget to the World Bank, a UN-affiliated organization? Why are we giving a lot of money to the IMF as well, which is pretty hopeless in what they do anyway? It's not only despots. I'd like to take the debate away from that, but also to look at these supernatural organizations whose the CEOs, the directors of these organizations earn a huge amount of money, funded partially by DFID, yet they don't seem to do much good in this world. And the problem is that the way that foreign aid is done and structured is that it really never reaches the people that need that or that desperately need it. And the facts speak for themselves. It's an ongoing mess, the black hole of neediness that is not alleviated by foreign aid. There's something very wrong going on with that.
Next turn.
Okay, so look, I would totally agree about some of those criticisms about the World Bank, certainly about the IMF, absolutely. I mean, there's an enormous debt crisis that exists right now in the developing world that those institutions are not doing anywhere near enough to alleviate because they've been lending money to countries for years and years and years. And those countries are now, having to repay those debts rather than spend the money they desperately need to spend dealing with the coronavirus pandemic and so on. So I absolutely agree to the idea that everyone has the right to a good life. And I just think that as a country which is so wealthy and where we've made so much wealth over the decades and centuries that have gone before from exploiting other parts of the world, that's how the multimillionaires and the billionaires in the West have made so much of their money, that we have a duty to redistribute and to call for redistribution of some of that money. Now, whether that's spent in the right way
you do realise, Nick, how much money we're spending during this pandemic, and what you're saying might be out of date. When we look at the amount of debt this country will be in now because of the pandemic.
No, because this country, fortunately for us, can borrow at virtually virtually nothing. I mean, we're borrowing huge amounts of money and we're spending them on our, and that's right.
But if we're borrowing, we may not be paying much in interest, but we're still in debt. It's still borrowing.
Yes, but there's no problem with that as long as interest rates are low. There is a massive problem if you're an indebted African country who desperately needs to scale up payments on your health systems, for example, or dealing with the fallout of coronavirus on people who've lost their jobs and so on, and you're in a debt crisis because you are repaying. And where's your money going to? It's going to the City of London. It's going to the major financial centres where bondholders and banks that have lent that money are demanding repayments.
But the problem is, first of all, even if you're paying a low interest, you're still borrowing the money for foreign aid. The second point is that by giving foreign aid is structured in such a way that you have a lot of these corrupt regimes that are propped up by foreign aid. And why should these regimes take this money to look after their own citizens? They don't need to. If Western taxpayers can do it for them. It's outrageous that the poorest people in our own country, factory workers who pay tax, the poorest people in our country, a rich country, absolutely, are being taxed so that their money is given to rich people in poor countries. There's something very wrong and it's an imbalance. I think the point about money being channeled back into to the banking institutions, etc. Yes, I'm sure that happens a lot, just as I'm sure that money is given to despotic regimes and channeled away to Swiss bank accounts. But the point is, in politics, perception is everything. And the perception is that Britain is socially and economically having problems, borrowing money to pay for other people in other countries. Regardless of the history, the reality is right now, we can't afford to do that. We have to look after our own citizens first. Also, what happens with foreign aid, British people are very, very generous. They give a lot of money to charity. Foreign aid removes that choice of what charities that we can give to. For example, I don't want the money that I pay in tax given to UNRWA. I don't want the money that I pay in tax given to the UN.
Well, I don't want it given to the British military, but it's just too bad, isn't it? I mean, I have to elect another government if I want to change those spending priorities.
But the British military...
No, hold on, Karen, let him finish. Hold on.
Okay.
There's always stuff we spend our taxes on that we don't want, that we might not like. But the fact is, foreign aid is a minuscule proportion of your taxes compared to stuff I don't like the prison system or the military. I don't like spending my taxes on those things either.
But I think you would find that the silent majority find foreign aid inconsequential, that they find it very frustrating that £14 billion, that might be a little bit with the whole budget that we spend each year, but it's a lot of money. Just for example, of what I gave about veterans. Prisons and military, that's a discussion for something else, but foreign aid is not a necessity. It really isn't. And
well, it is a necessity, of course it is. It's not an insult. What are you talking about? The idea that you should, I mean, while I may agree with you completely that there are problems with the way aid's spent, the idea that we should assist people to have a decent education and decent healthcare around the world is far from disgusting. That's something which overcomes the selfishness. The selfishness.
No, it's not selfish.
That you're discussing. That you're putting forward.
What is selfish is allowing your own altruistic principles to allow you to actually think to yourself that, oh, well, it doesn't matter that people in this country are suffering, let's just give foreign aid. Lofty platitudes do not help our ex-servicemen sleeping on the streets.
I have spent my whole life fighting against homelessness in this country and fighting for a better deal for this country. The fact is, you do not improve those things. You do not improve those things by saying our people are more important than people anywhere else in the world. We live in a global economy.
I'm an immigrant to this country. And I think to myself, why isn't this country taking care of its own people first? You know, I would imagine if I was somebody working with a very low salary who's taxed quite a bit for that and just sees that.
Really the truth.
Let me give you an example about pay for slay that happens. Have you heard of pay for slay?
For what, sorry?
Pay for slay.
No, I haven't.
You haven't? Okay, so let me explain that to you. So DFID gives 75 million annually to the Palestinian Authority and Hamas. Some of that money is channeled to terrorists who have murdered
No,
Israelis.
it isn't. That's untrue. That's completely untrue.
It is.
No, it's completely untrue. I've worked on the Palestinian situation and I know about the humanitarian assistance that's given to the Palestinian Authority, and none of it is channeled to terrorists.
No, and I think we're going way off where we began when we were talking about this some 15 or 20 minutes ago. What we'll do is we'll give you each a final thought. And Karen, we'll start with you.
Yeah. Okay. So basically, I think that foreign aid is much more destructive than helpful. Lofty ideas do not help people in this country that need the money far more than some despot in another country or a terrorist sitting in an Israeli jail who murdered Jews in Israel. I think that it cannot account properly for every cent that is spent for foreign aid. It's very destructive. There are better ways, like helping grassroots charities and giving British people the freedom of choice to do that, rather than wasting billions on foreign aid.
Nick, your turn. Final thought.
Well, unfortunately, what you've heard tonight is prejudice and not facts.
That is lies.
What we need is everybody in the world to have decent education, decent healthcare, and decent welfare. And that's how we eradicated poverty in this country. It wasn't like this in this country before the Second World War either. Now it is. We've got there to a greater degree because of redistribution of income, because of taxes, and because of regulating the people that are causing poverty in the world. And I believe we can do that all around the world.
Okay. Well, what an argument that's been. You're very, very passionate indeed. Karen and Nick, thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thanks to Stephen and his guests on The Night Watchman. And I want to know from you, should holidaymakers coming from Spain be forced to quarantine for 14 days on their return to the UK? 08085 909 693. Speak to me.
On digital, BBC Sounds, smart speaker and online.
This is BBC Radio 5 Live.
BBC News at 1 o'clock. This is Adam Porter. The Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab has insisted the decision to impose a 14-day quarantine on people arriving in the UK from Spain was taken to protect the country from coronavirus. Spain has seen a spike in cases. But British holidaymakers already in Spain have complained about the lack of notice, and the airline industry says it's caused chaos. Ashley Price, who owns a bar in Benidorm, says the action should be more targeted.
Currently, Benidorm has one active case, one in the whole of Benidorm, and Benidorm's a big place. To have one active case and not be allowing British tourists to come or telling them not to come is a huge issue.
From today, everyone aged over 11 will have to wear a face covering on public transport in Wales. It brings the country into line with the rest of the UK. Cinemas, museums and beauty salons are reopening in Wales, but pubs, cafes and restaurants will have to wait until at least the 3rd of August. The government will announce its strategy to tackle obesity later, including banning junk food adverts on television before the watershed and ending confectionery displays at store checkouts. The Health Secretary Matt Hancock has written an article in the Daily Telegraph saying that everyone who's overweight should lose £5 to save the NHS £100 million. Dr. Ab Tarani, who lectures in obesity medicine at the University of Birmingham, says even small weight losses can be beneficial.
A lot of health benefits can be gained by a relatively modest amount of weight loss of 10%. From diabetes to blood pressure to heart disease, even to mortality. So I don't think the aim of the treatment of weight loss should be to go back to normal weight, because as the statistics show, that is really close to impossible.
Between two groups of people in the Rusholme area of Manchester. 3 other people were also stabbed and were taken to hospital. Police say they've begun a murder inquiry and a 17-year-old boy has been arrested. President Trump has lashed out on Twitter at the institute bearing the name of his Republican predecessor, Ronald Reagan. Until now, Mr. Trump has avoided criticism of Mr. Reagan's legacy, even though he's publicly fallen out with both former Republican presidents from the Bush family. David Bamford reports.
Mr. Trump's comments came after the Reagan Foundation asked the Trump campaign to stop using President Reagan's name and image for election fundraising. Last week, the campaign asked supporters for $45 donations in return for gold coins emblazoned with images of Mr. Trump and Mr. Reagan. Mr. Trump said the Washington Post, his bitter enemy, was now clearly running the foundation. In the same tweet, he also criticised the conservative outlet Fox News after it reported recent polls showing Mr. Trump trailing his Democratic presidential rival, Joe Biden.
BBC News, it's 3 minutes past 1.
5 Live scores. The FA Cup final.
2 clubs steeped in silverware, both with a whole who's who of heroes, both trying now to make memories of their own.
Arsenal versus Chelsea.
Azpilicueta's cross, Giroud, and it's gone in! Aubameyang with a free run. Aubameyang with a second goal.
It's on.
We will have a derby in the FA Cup final.
The FA Cup final. Saturday at 4:30 on BBC 5 Live and iPlayer.
This is BBC 5 Live. Call free 08085 909 693. Text 85058. Text will be charged at your standard message rate. Plus, see our privacy notice. bbc.co.uk/5live.
across the UK.
This is BBC Radio 5 Live with Dotun Adebayo.
Your night watchman from now until 5 o'clock. It'll be great to have your company. You're listening to 5 Live across the country on local radio, on BBC Radio Scotland, BBC Radio Wales and BBC Radio Ulster. A very good morning to you. These are the topics I want to talk to you about on 08085 909 693. That's the number you need to have a conversation as we head towards August. Is that foreign holiday now looking like such a good idea? If you're one of more than 500,000 people in Spain right now, well, you're facing 2 weeks of quarantine when you get back home. That's a fortnight of quarantine. Here's Alex in Tenerife talking to Stephen Nolan earlier, and as you can hear, he's not HP.
The government gave us the green light. They gave us the green light to go. They said it was okay, and then all of a sudden, 7 days later, it's not okay. There's been 426 deaths in the UK in the last 5 days, and only 12 in Spain. So how is that acceptable?
You sound frustrated.
I'm seriously frustrated, mate. I'm seriously frustrated. The whole. It's a shambles. It's an absolute shambles. The way the UK government have handled the situation is an absolute shambles.
Hang on, though.
We took the decision as swiftly as we could, and that we can't make apologies for doing it, particularly in relation to localised or internationally in relation to Spain, a particular country where we see we must take action.
That's a Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab with, well, nothing to apologise for in this decision. Labour's Jonathan Ashworth isn't buying that.
The way in which this decision has been made in the last 24 hours is, frankly, shambolic. There are holidaymakers in Spain at the moment, confused and distressed. There are people about to go on holiday to Spain and the islands like Tenerife who are confused, and they don't know whether their employers will allow them to take 2 weeks quarantine.
Shay, it's over to you. 08085 909 693. The number to call to talk to me and talk to the rest of the country as well, because everybody's got an opinion on this. Every call tells a story. I want to hear yours. How is this government decision now going to affect your summer plans? Is this a sensible step to stop a second wave or a panic measure? Which would you say it is? Your opinions, please. 08085 909 693. You can call me from now. Should holidaymakers coming from Spain be forced to quarantine for 14 days on their return to the UK? 08085 909 693. Pick up the phone and speak to me. Remember, 14 days. Some of these holidaymakers only went to Spain for a week. And also, if you're planning to go abroad this summer, have you now changed your mind because of this new government ruling? Is it still okay to get on a plane and get out of the UK? Or should we all be heading for the Costa del Southend? You tell me. Oh, gee, yeah, I had to swallow there because it was hard to swallow, wasn't it? Imagine that, the whole country heading for Southend just to avoid 14 days of quarantine. The number to call, 08085 909 693. We heard Alex, the irate caller to Stephen Nolan's show. He used the word shambolic. And then we hear the Labour Jonathan Ashworth, the Labour MP, saying the same word again. What do you say? You're my ears of what's going on in the country. You're my conscience, or the conscience of us all, including the Prime Minister. What do you say? What do you say to this? Where are you planning to spend your summer holidays, and will it be affected? Will it be affected by this decision now? Tonight we're also discussing whether people over 40, I only just make that cut if you divide by 5, you know, the way I usually do. But should people over 40 have to pay more tax than younger people to fund elderly care?
Unless you are on an extremely low income, have very few assets, and have sky-high needs, you end up paying for it. and you can easily wipe you out. At the moment, about 100 people a week are wiped out financially because of the care bills they've had to pay. They are penniless. And that's not anything that anyone wants to be looking forward to in life.
Yeah, that's the head of Age UK. Forgive me, that's the head of Age UK. We'll hear more from her later on. But more money for elderly care is something we all want, right? You will all have an opinion of this, but imagine middle-aged people having to cough up for something that we all want. Should that be the case? Oh yeah, and we're also giving a shout out to Doug in Liverpool. Take a bow, Doug. Wow. I'll tell you why. It's a story in the Sun newspaper today. And Doug, I'm sure he's not the only person in the country, by the way, who has a house that nothing in that house, I'm talking furniture, carpets, cookers, everything, the wallpaper, the kitchen, everything in the house is from 1948. Nothing has changed in the house since 1948, and I do mean nothing. 72 years. Have you ever lived in a time warp home? Tell me about it. 08085 909 693. I should have said, have you ever lived in a time warp home? Lucky you. Tell me about it. And later in the programme, I'll be talking about the Prime Minister's war on obesity as well. I'll tell you just how I managed to lose nearly 4 stone since the beginning of lockdown. Yeah, my missus loves it. She loves it. She's like, why did it take you this long to lose it? Anyway, I'll tell you about that later on, but we will be talking. Oh, by the way, I didn't diet. But we will be talking about obesity. It's the Prime Minister's next challenge. But let's go straight to the calls. 08085 909 693. Ian in Oldham is a new caller, and welcome to the programme. Ian, gosh, this 14-day quarantine is causing your family some issues, isn't it?
Well, it is. And my brother and his partner emigrated to near Malaga, and they were coming over to see family next in about 4 days. So this has been dropped on them. So they're not quite sure whether they're going to go ahead with that plan or cancel everything or just come over and see how it goes. But what my brother said to me today was that he's going to probably stay near Wrexham, but apparently in the Wrexham area there have been more coronavirus cases than in the whole of Andalusia, which is the size of Wales as part of Spain. So he was rather annoyed about the government's decision to sort of make a blanket disqualification of people coming in from Spain, even though in parts of Spain there are hardly any cases at all.
What was he most annoyed about? Was it simply that he thinks this was the wrong decision by the government, or is it more about the interruption to his own travel plans?
Well, both, I think, because him and his partner have not been able to come over from Spain since January, so they made this plan after everything had been opened up or relaxed. But probably more than that, the fact that, there's an indication that in parts of Spain, large areas of Spain, like Andalusia, I'm not an expert on Spanish geography, but Andalusia is a massive area, and there are less cases than there are in a sort of modest Welsh town, basically. So he thinks that it's a complete overreaction on the part of the government, I think.
You could argue that. No, I do get that. But the headline story about Spain is that even in Spain, they're fearful of what they believe will be a second wave of this coronavirus. So when you look at the bigger picture, the government itself is like, whoa, they're worried in Spain. We should also be worried, even though in certain areas there are higher cases of infection here in the UK than there is in Spain. Arguably, they're also protecting the British people that have come over and the British people who are over here. When they've come over, you don't know. You don't know what they brought with them. They just don't know. Can your brother understand?
Nobody knows that, do they? None of it. Nobody knows. The sort of logical outcome of that kind of argument is that nobody would go anywhere. Basically, I think his main gripe is that the lack of evidence to suggest that people coming from parts of Spain are creating any more risk than is already in the country, basically, and possibly less risk. I was just struck by, the figures he gave me. I've not been able to check them. It's not as easy to check stuff as you think. But it looks like, there are hardly any cases in the part of Spain that he's coming from. And but everyone is being refused access. Well, not refused access, but they have to come and quarantine in England. So it just seems to me there are no figures. I've not seen any figures from the government, though. Maybe I haven't had a chance to look at them, but that's good to listen.
I appreciate the call, Ian. Thank you very much. And really, I want to hear from other listeners as well, because Ian is not unique in that situation either. If you've got family members or relatives, same thing, isn't it? If you've got loved ones who are in Spain, considering coming back, and now they're faced with a 14-day quarantine, what are they thinking? What are they thinking, as well as what are you thinking if you were to go over there and you've got a holiday booked as well? 08085 909 693. I suspect that this is an issue that ain't going to end tonight, but let's start the conversation off tonight so at least the Prime Minister knows what you're thinking about his decision or the government's decision. Let's speak to Rose in Bristol. Hello, Rose. How are you?
Hello, I'm very well. How are you?
Yeah, I'm very well, and thank you very much for calling. You weren't planning on going overseas, were you? Who do regularly, is it fair to make us go in quarantine for another 14 days when we've gone on a 7-day trip to Spain?
Well, I think it's more than fair. I think you're doubly blessed because you can come back and have another 14 days of resting. And I have to say that all those women and men who are going to work in the nighttime economy and they still can't feed their kids and have to go to food bank, they can't think about a holiday, they can't think about a day trip to Southend, let alone going to. And I think if this COVID emergency has done anything, it hopefully has helped people think. Are in the upper echelons. What is it like for people who can't eat properly or have a roof over their head? And if it still hasn't done it, if it's still got people complaining that, oh, my holiday to Spain is ruined, well then maybe it hasn't worked yet,
You have no sympathy for those who can afford to go on a great holiday to Marbella, for example, those who are fortunate enough, or even those who might, as I did, hitchhike all the way to Seville and then go to Cadiz, have a great time, come up through Barcelona, just minding your own business. But then when you get back to the UK, they say, right, that's it, old boy, stay in your home for the next 14 days. You have no sympathy whatsoever for us.
Some people have been in lockdown for 4 months now, older people. You're just out of touch, basically. It's like there's no hitchhiking now anyway because of the threat. And
I'm just giving that as an example. I was giving that as an example, but there are other people who might visit Spain but aren't uber wealthy in the way that you say. Well, hang on a second. Let's think about the people who can't afford to.
Okay, they're not all uber wealthy, but there's wonderful places in this country to go. Scotland is like a wonderland, and Ireland and Wales. So why have everyone got to shoot off to Spain?
So no sympathy if you leave these shores, but lots of sympathy if you stay in these shores. What they call it, a staycation. Out of interest, where are you going this summer, Rose?
I'm going nowhere. I can't afford to go anywhere. I'm hoping to go to Cornwall next year, but we'll have to wait and see. It's like these people who are complaining, they really have to think about what it's like if you can't feed yourself, you know?
Okay.
They have people going to food banks. And it's not people who don't work, it's millions of people who are working, even in the National Health Service, and care, and they still can't make ends meet. And now, so it just shows how out of touch you all are.
Thank you.
Completely out of touch.
Rose, you know, I'm trying to get back in touch. That's why every call tells a story. Yours has been really fascinating. Tells another story, and we should consider that. I'll see if other listeners do. And thank you very much. Call up any time. 08085 909 693. Does the sympathy that you have for, or would normally have, for people who have been on holiday to the sunny climes whilst you've been stuck over here, does that sympathy ebb away with regards to the quarantine that they may have to endure, or they will have to endure currently, 14-day quarantine, all for just having the temerity, this is what Rose in Bristol would say, having the temerity to go overseas when there are people who can't afford food to eat in this country? Rose has got a point, though, hasn't she? Your thoughts, please. 08085 909 693. Let's speak to Jeff, who's another new caller in Prestwood in Buckinghamshire. Oh, Jeff, I do love our new callers, so thank you for sparing the time to come and talk to us. So welcome to Overnights here on BBC Radio 5 Live. Tell me, this decision by the government to force 14 days of quarantine on anybody who is coming to this country from Spain, is that the right decision? What do you think?
I think he's 100% right. Yeah, definitely. I have full sympathy for people that have booked holidays before the shutdown to get their money back, obviously. But the people that have gone out there today, or are in Spain today, have booked their holiday, fairly lately. They knew the risks.
No, but that's just it, Jeff. You heard Alex earlier talking, and he's irate because he went to Spain because the government had given the green light. You can start going, and we're going to build all these air bridges, and obviously Spain is the main destination for Brits in the summer, and he thought it was okay. So suddenly the government changes its mind, but he's stuck out there.
But the government haven't changed their minds. They said that if there was a spike, Germany, London, France, wherever you go, this virus could just blow up out of nowhere. And once it does, the rate of infection is so fast. I mean, we experienced that in this country back in March. We had a few. Next week we had hundreds. Following week we had thousands. But the same, I know in Spain at the moment it's not necessarily in the holiday resorts, but it is in Spain. And even internal travelling in Spain can spread that virus within a matter of days to hundreds of thousands of people.
I get that.
We're bringing back. I did hear earlier on in the evening how many, but the number of people out in Spain at the moment from this country runs into hundreds of thousands. Even if only 5% of those people have got the virus, they're going to land in different parts of this country, and it's going to explode again.
So would you be surprised then if other people, because of the reoccurrence of the COVID pandemic in Leicester, but I don't hear any other countries, and remember that's localised, just like you said, you know that maybe the holiday resorts in Spain are free of this, but there are other areas in Spain. But they're not doing the same back to us. I don't know any other countries saying, no, anybody that goes to Britain or is coming from Britain has to sit down for 14 days. Maybe the United States would say that, but they take it to everybody. But they're not, referencing what's going on in Leicester, are they?
No, quite.
Do you know what I mean? Why is it one law for us and one law for them? They need to live as well. They need our money. They need people over here going there and spending money in the holiday resorts that they have built up over the last half century for us, Jeff. You go to Spain, it's like little England there when they start ordering their eggs and bacon and fish and chips and all that. They've done that for us lot, and now we're turning our backs on them.
Yeah, we're not turning our backs on them. Believe me, I sympathise with them. I really do. I sympathise with any business that is struggling because it's a terrible period in our history that we're living through. I don't think any other generation, even going back to the Second World War or the First World War, has ever lived through anything quite like this.
Indeed.
It's an unforeseen enemy. It's there. So the government have been condemned for not acting fast enough in the past. Now they're being condemned for acting too quick. But if this procedure that the government have brought in saves one life, that's got to be worth it, hasn't it?
Oh yeah. I do get that part. It's just how you go about it, and there's difference of opinions. Well, and I take your point, particularly the point that you said that the government did actually, and I'd forgotten about this, so thank you. I can't thank you enough for trying to re-inform the night watchman. I remember the government saying, look, if there is a spike anywhere else, we might have to impose these quarantine measures. They did say absolutely right. So we were all told, but it's like getting that into your head when you've booked a holiday to Spain and you're thinking, hang on, well, you make decisions for your immediate circumstances. Listen, Jeff, just very quickly, not totally different from the conversation we're having, but you said we've never known anything like this. And I can hear that you're as young as I am. Good, our generation, or maybe slightly younger than me.
I think I'm probably slightly older.
I'm not sure. I think it's going the other way. But tell me, what's the worst situation like this or not like this? The worst situation that you think we've lived through communally here in Britain in your lifetime?
In my lifetime? Well, I was born in 1946, just after the war. And I honestly think that my generation had the easiest. We didn't live through a war. We were born just after one. I mean, obviously, I knew my grandparents and my father fought in the Second World War, and what they went through. And in fact, I live in a small village in Buckinghamshire, and my grandfather's house was the only one in the village that was bombed during the Second World War, and we're 30 miles from London. But what they went through and how they coped with it. I don't think anything I think what we're living through now is worse than that, to be honest with you.
Well, to be honest with you, and thank you very much for being honest with us and taking the time out to call. You're a new caller tonight, but you're not going to be a new caller tomorrow night from 1 o'clock when you call up. So I'm going to have some conversations for you that will entice you to call again. But I think we're going to have some stories to tell for the next generations. Can't wait. Thank you, Jeff. Really appreciate it. Angela in Coventry is with us. And Angela, one of the topics we're talking about tonight is healthy eating. The government is about to launch, Boris Johnson later on today will launch what could be described as a battle on obesity. Long overdue, some people would say, because we've had this crisis of obesity in this country for a while. One of the focuses of Boris Johnson, the government's attempt to deal with our obesity crisis. Remember, the stats are that two-thirds of us, it's mind-boggling. Two-thirds of us are obese. Why is that, Angela? Just before we talk about healthy eating, do you have any thoughts from your own anecdotal evidence?
Good morning, Dr. Liz.
Good morning to you.
Yes. It's a pleasure to speak to you. I spoke to you a few years back.
Thank you.
I started to lose a lot of weight because I'm going because my nan used to lose the weight that I'm losing, but my family's gone the way a little bit bigger than me. So I used to be quite worried about that loss of weight. So I get checked regularly, and they said my cholesterol was fine and everything, but I've got to drink more water for my kidneys because they're a bit dry. But I think I cycle every other day. I do a lot of diabetes exercise. What I was trying to explain myself was when my old doctor, he passed away about a good 8 years ago now, and he used to say a diet doesn't mean to say it will suit one person. He said, if I do a little diet, I get ill. I can't change anything. He said, if I stuck to what I do, then somebody else, do you see what I mean?
I totally see what you mean. I think it's a huge, important point that you put across, you know. I don't know if the government will take this into consideration. I think 100% you're right about diets. Each diet suits. You know, we all are different. Our makeup is different. Our psychology is different. Not every diet suits everybody. You're absolutely. But you, sorry, go on.
Sorry, you can.
Yeah, no, I was going to ask how the diagnosis of type 2 diabetes affected the way you eat. You've told us that you cycle every day and everything. How did it change the way you eat, Angela? What did you do to control your weight?
Oh, gosh, that's such a long time ago.
Oh, okay.
Well, what it was as well, I used to work nights, and certain times of the day, and I still struggle now, because the sugar produces energy in your body at certain times of the day. Say if I had to go to work in the middle of the night like now, I would produce the energy in my sugar in my body in the day, and it's connected, and it's been a research on it. And when I talked to my diabetic doctor, I explained to her, she said, it's not your fault. She said, when people lose a lot of weight, the sugar is still in balance. Because I do these exercise, and I got my sugar quite really down, but I wanted to get it a bit more down, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, no, I do, and I appreciate you telling us about it. There's more to tell, and so we'll come back to you another time. Feel free to call anytime, Angela, in Coventry. I have to go to the news in a moment, but what about that topic? What about that topic? I want more calls on this, to be honest, because I think it is genuinely a story that touches so many people, and you can give advice as well. You're welcome to. Always happy to get your advice overnight. Question, why are 2/3 of us overweight? Isn't that shocking to you? But there are lots of reasons, aren't there? This is one, and Angela was touching on some of the reasons there as well. Why is it that 2/3 of us, it seems to me that there is something fundamentally wrong when 2/3 of us are risking our health in this way? But you tell me, in your situation or what you've experienced, 08085 909 693 is the number to call. 08085 909 693. Pick up the phone and talk to your night watchman. After the news and sport, I'll speak to Carol in Bath, Sarah in Walthamstow, and Linda in Yorkshire, in the Yorkshire Dales, and she's a new caller as well. The time is 32 minutes past 1.
On digital, BBC Sounds, smart speaker and online.
This is BBC Radio 5 Live.
And with the BBC News on 5 Live, I'm Simon Kelsey. The Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab has insisted the decision to impose a 14-day quarantine on people arriving in the UK from Spain was taken to protect the country from coronavirus. Spain has seen a spike in cases, but British holidaymakers already there have complained about the lack of notice. The government will unveil a new strategy to combat obesity later, follows warnings from health experts that obese people were more likely to have a severe reaction to coronavirus. Labour has called for a ban on junk food adverts and measures to stop children buying energy drinks. And from today, everyone aged over 11 will have to wear a face covering on public transport in Wales. That brings the country into line with the rest of the UK. That's the news on 5 Live. Now with the sport, here's Andy Barwell.
Thank you. Well, Manchester United and Chelsea claimed the last Champions League places on the final day of this season's Premier League. While Aston Villa survived, but Watford and Bournemouth are both down to the Championship. Bournemouth were winners of their 38th and last game, 3-1 at Everton. It wasn't enough, and it's cast doubt on manager Eddie Howe's future at the club.
We were excellent today, played very well. The frustrating thing is when you see us play like that, you think, how are we in the position that we are? I always knew the ability in the squad was there. For whatever reason, it hasn't been there consistently enough this season, and it's a very painful feeling right now.
Watford also ended a 5-year Premier League stay after losing 3-2 at Arsenal. But Aston Villa remain in the top flight for next season. Jack Grealish's equaliser late on in a 1-1 draw at West Ham earned Dean Smith's side the point that they needed to survive.
It's a magnificent achievement because up to unfortunately the pandemic, a lot of people had us relegated and we've had to work extremely hard. I thought we used the pandemic really well. We've been solid defensively, we've looked strong, and we've managed to stay in the Premier League now, which is a big achievement and something to build on.
Chelsea's 2-0 win over Wolves through Mason Mount and Olivier Giroud secured Champions League football, where they've been joined by Manchester United, 2-0 winners at Leicester City, who have to be content with Europa League football. The United boss, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, was proud with his team's efforts in putting together an unbeaten 14-game run.
I think that we've given our fans something to believe in. And also for me, walking into that training ground every day, the environment there is so much better than what it's been before.
It's the Europa League for Tottenham Hotspur after drawing 1-1 at Crystal Palace. Brighton were 2-1 winners over Burnley. Southampton beat Sheffield United 3-1. The runners-up this season, Manchester City, hammered already relegated Norwich 5-0. And the champions Liverpool finished on 99 points for the season. Virgil van Dijk, Divock Origi and Sadio Mane scored in a 3-1 success at Newcastle. And Swansea City beat Brentford by a 1-0. First leg of their Championship playoff semi-final. Cricket now. West Indies hopes of retaining the Wisden Trophy hang by a thread. In the third and deciding test at Old Trafford, they resume their second innings on 10 for 2 on the fourth morning. Set 399 by England. Stuart Broad needs just one more wicket to make it 500 in test matches. Well, Rory Burns made 90 to help set that target, and he says that Broad is in a special vein of form.
He's obviously in a great rhythm at the moment. He's bowling very well, and it's tough work, and it always is tough work up the top, and it's even tougher when I was bowling.
Elsewhere, 1,000 spectators were at the Oval for Surrey's crowd pilot friendly with Middlesex. And Britain's former World Number 1 Andy Murray says he is mentally preparing for the US Open to go ahead. The United States Tennis Association hope to confirm within the next 10 days or so whether the tournament can be staged behind closed doors. It's scheduled to start at the end of August.
The flags of the nations frame a scene of intense activity on an airfield near Silverstone in Northamptonshire. Here on this British motor racing circuit, the world's leading aces, with their supercars, mobile workshops, team managers, mechanics, and all the paraphernalia which must accompany them, are preparing for the greatest of all races. It's a great and colourful day for British motorsport.
The 70th anniversary of the British Grand Prix. Live from Silverstone this weekend on 5 Live. This is BBC 5 Live, available on the BBC Sounds app with Dotun Adebayo.
And with you, of course, and your calls on 08085 909 693. Every call tells a story. I want to hear from you tonight about the Telegraph's front page, which says, lose £5 and save the NHS 100 million quid. It's because the government is revealing a plan later on today to tackle obesity. It follows warnings from health experts that obese people were more likely to have a severe reaction to coronavirus. But is it that easy to lose weight?
People simply cannot afford to buy much healthier food, and there's a segment of the population where that is the case, and that they end up providing for their families and for themselves food which is cheap to produce, things you can buy easily and eat quickly and easily, and those tend to be things which are very high in calories and therefore very bad for you. And there's no talk about that, how that can be changed for the less fortunate in society, and I think that's a very, very big issue indeed.
Yeah, that is our overnight opinion editor for tonight. We'll hear more from him later on. But can you afford to live a healthy lifestyle? That's the question. 08085 909 693. Can you afford to live a healthy lifestyle? They do say it's more expensive that way. I've heard varying opinions on that. I do want yours though. We're also talking about whether a foreign holiday right now is a good idea. Because if you're one of more than 500,000 people, 500,000 Brits in Spain right now, well, guess what? You're facing 2 weeks quarantine when you come back. Is this a sensible step by the government to stop a second wave, or is it a panic measure by the government? 08085 909 693. I want to hear from you. Carol in Bath is with us. Hello, Carol.
Hello.
Hello, good to speak to you, Carol. Well, what do you make of what the government's decided now, that if you're in Spain and you're coming back to this country, you're going to have to self-isolate for 2 weeks?
Yeah. And the red light was that we're going to change our ideas on what we do if anything, if anything re-emerges. Well, no one can predict what re-emerges. So I think that should have been a red light for most people, because the government so far have been pretty incompetent when dealing with the coronavirus. This is a pandemic, it's worldwide, and we all need to be informed, and that's what we haven't been up to now. And for me, to go abroad to Europe right now is not a good idea. And the government kind of encouraged people to do that when they really shouldn't have, because they weren't informed.
Indeed, but Carol, it's not a good idea for you now, partly because of what the government's imposing, which is a 14-day quarantine. But was it a good idea when the government simply said, if there is a second wave, imagine you're planning a holiday for yourself, maybe for others as well, and you've got to make a decision, and the government says, well, if there is one, will you not take the chance to say, okay, there may be one, but there may not be one, but one thing's for certain, there's only one summer, and we go to Spain for the summer. That's where we want to go.
Yeah, but it's not certainty.
Yeah, but if it's not certainty... Sorry.
No, but if you've got family, for instance, you don't put them at risk, do you?
No.
On if.
No, remember, when the if was posed, Spain was arguably in a less infected state than the United Kingdom.
Yes, they send swarms of people in there that may be infected.
But
this is not sense.
Yeah, it's not sense for the Spanish. We know, maybe it's not sense for the Spanish, I should say, but they believe that they can cope. They need the tourists in.
Do they?
Well, they do. They do.
Every economy is suffering at the moment.
Exactly.
And I think, there are areas in this country that you could go to, especially lately. It's been lovely and hot and sunny. Put money back into our own economy. And I think mainly it's the people that have got a villa there, or they know people over there, expats.
Oh no, you'd think that,
and
wouldn't you?
And they're going for a visit. It's like visiting next door neighbour.
Yeah, maybe.
It's a pandemic.
But maybe there are one or two people
we need to be sensible about it.
Fair enough. But Carol, you've got a valid point. I'm not even going to argue with it. But tell me this one thing.
Go on.
Yeah, look. If you had got, let's say, taken 2 weeks holiday for this couple of weeks, and you had planned to go overseas, you've been dreaming about going overseas, and the government says, well, now it's okay, But if there is another spike, do you not take your chances?
No, it's a red light, isn't it? Because this government, they don't know what they're doing. And it's always if, or but, or maybe. And it doesn't, it's never positive, there's never backup for it. They're not doing, they're just, clutching at straws most of the time. And they don't know what they're doing. And this new thing about obesity, well, it confounds me.
Yeah.
What they're talking.
What about it confounds you?
Well, it confounds me that they're putting it all down to exercise and eating properly. There are people who are obese who have, what is it? The glands in your neck.
God, don't give me biology homework, for goodness sake. But thank you. No, I'm not going there.
No, I'm not trying to.
I've got human biology.
There are people who are on drugs because their body doesn't function in the way that ours does.
Oh, I see, yeah.
And they convert food in a very different way.
That's very true. I know.
They have problems with their weight. And it's not a problem it is a problem for them, but their body has a problem. We talked about Jenny Murray. She was on in the news the other day, and she talked about obese people, and she admits to herself that she's obese, but it's not her fault. She has a medical condition that is a function that isn't functioning properly.
You know, funny enough, Jenny Murray, I'll tell you a funny story. I used to see, I've never met her, but I used to take the train from London to Manchester. And one of the days of the week that I used to take this, she was on the same train. I think she was in a slightly higher class than me. Let's leave it at that. But she'd get off, I think it was Macclesfield or something like that. And then I said, wow, this is the woman from the radio, from Woman's Hour. And it was really impressive. But you're right, she probably will acknowledge that she... including me, are out of touch with reality, that people in this country can't find food to eat, so why are we all going overseas? What Carol said there is, what she suggested there is that this government is hopeless in dealing with this pandemic. That's her opinion, and we should have taken that into consideration when we were getting this sort of like half thumbs up. You can go to Spain, but if there is another wave, you're going to have to quarantine yourself. I wonder, am I the only one that hasn't considered what kind of government we have currently, how effective they are when booking a holiday? I haven't booked a holiday, but even thinking of booking a holiday, the government doesn't come into my equation, but maybe it does now. Maybe it does because of the last 4 months of... Do you judge the government now before you make a big decision like, going on holiday, buying a car, moving house? Do you judge that the government may say one thing one day and another day? Is there anybody that's been affected in that? Well, I'd like to hear from you, please. 08085 909 69. In Walthamstow in East London. Good morning.
Good morning, Dotton. Oh, my goody aunt.
I am so glad that you are not another Sarah in Walthamstow, because I would have had to apologise. I meant it for another Sarah in Walthamstow. I'm so glad.
No,
anyway.
I'm a bit confused because previously people were complaining that the government gave too much notice. It was going to be 2 weeks before you had to wear masks, and now they're complaining that it's 5 hours before you had to have 14 days notification and isolation when you came back from Spain. So people really need to actually sort themselves out. But I think it's quite funny I shouldn't think it's funny. With Grant Shapps and his family on holiday in Spain at the moment?
Yes, you're very right. The Transport Minister is in Spain, so he's going to have to come back in quarantine for 14 days. But you don't have any sympathy for him. If he, a government minister, didn't realise that the government was going to change its brief on this, then, well, what chance is there for any of us, you know? You have to have sympathy for yeah, all the rest of us who booked holidays in Spain. You have sympathy for us, don't you? Or them.
I do indeed, absolutely. I think it's been horrible for everyone. Everyone's desperate to get out. Everyone's been in lockdown. Everyone's been like stuck in their flats, or if they're lucky enough to have gardens and stuff like that. They just want to get away, and they're trying to do it. And obviously Spain's the nearest thing. And that's all a bit. No, that's all gone a bit. It's separating now, hasn't it? I always put it that way.
No, you put it in the way that you're feeling, and that's good for me. That's good. I want to hear how you're feeling about this. Do you not think that people who booked holidays to Spain since the beginning of lockdown were a little bit? Is naive too weak a word to describe them?
Yeah, okay. I'm going to get slammed for this, but okay. I think they were absolutely blinking mental, because I'm sorry. There was always going to be a second wave. It is always going to be in Spain, Greece, and places like that on the mainland continent. And no one should have booked. No one. It was just idiocy. It was always going to come, and I'm so sorry for everyone. Myself and my hubby, we are desperate to go on holiday, but we're not that silly. I feel so sorry for people.
So do I, funny enough. So do I. And I can't afford a holiday this year. Well, I'm not mad or insane, but I wouldn't describe other people like that who do. But thank you for throwing me in that beer pit of madness. However you describe it. Sarah, thank you. Really appreciate the call as well. What do you think? Is she right? Is Sarah right? That, you know, come on. I said naive. A little bit naive, maybe. But Sarah says, no, you're bonkers. You're out of your mind. But when did you lose your mind? At what point during this lockdown did you lose your mind, decide to book a holiday to Spain? Do you not read the newspaper? Do you not listen to the Night Watchman on 5 Live every other night, or 5 nights a week now? If you listen, well, no problem. You see what I mean? That's what Sarah's suggesting, maybe. Or at least that's how I've extrapolated what she's suggesting. Linda is in the Yorkshire Dales, a new caller, and thank you, Linda, for waiting patiently to come on. Really appreciate it. Good morning, by the way.
Hello.
Hello, Linda. How are you?
Hello, good morning. Just like to say, we came back from Spain on March the 20th.
Yeah.
We've been travelling around Spain. We stayed at one place, and then we heard all about the news in England. We don't often, when we're travelling, listen to the news, obviously, or on holiday. Back to the hotel, we heard it got worse. We started separating at that time from tables in a hotel for the airport. Then when we came back, I said to my husband, I think we're going to get checked at the airport, at Manchester Airport.
Yeah.
Nothing happened whatsoever. We came back to England and it was really bad then. And then a few days later, we went to my holiday home. It was locked down on the 23rd. I had to leave the villas and the caravans and everything on the 23rd by that.
And then that was in Spain still, yeah?
No, in England.
Oh, sorry, in England, right, okay.
Yes, we'd left Spain on that date, but we didn't know how severe it was in England.
Okay.
And after that, we had many holidays that had been booked. So we've lost 5.
You were going to go on holiday Italy 5 times?
Pardon?
Have you won the lottery or something? You had booked 6 holidays altogether?
Yes, in advance, yes.
But
not luxurious places. We like to travel around Italy.
So do I. I can't afford it. Not five. Not five.
Yeah.
No, genuinely.
Cheap flights and good accommodation, that's the main thing.
But five,
but
6
we can't
holidays.
do anymore. We won't do. We could fly again. We could have flown last week, but we won't do to Germany or to anywhere at the moment. No way. The
Linda.
reason... Go on.
I was going to say, Linda, look, I love you like I love curried chicken, you know, and maybe even more than that. But you're not going to get much sympathy from listeners.
I don't want sympathy.
Oh, you don't
I
want sympathy? Okay, then
we're not
no
going
sympathy
to do it.
for you. We're all jealous. But how has this latest quarantine affected your travel plans? Because if you love to travel so much, you would go travelling and come back and stay quarantine for 14 days. What's the biggie?
I wouldn't do it.
Really? Why not?
Because I'm not going to put myself in that position of being poorly.
Fair point, fair point. So you're making sure you're not going abroad anymore because of health reasons?
Yes, and my husband as well. My sister's travelling in 2 days to her home in France, but she's gone by the Channel.
Okay, yeah, that works.
And she's in a place at the moment, could be locked down tomorrow or the day after.
Gosh, mate.
She'll still drive.
So next year, when this is all over, will it be 10 or 12 holidays to make up for the ones that you're cancelling this year?
Not really, no. Not till we get have a vaccine.
Fair enough, and fair point. I think a lot of people agree with you as well. And thanks for the call. Was the experience good, your first time calling?
Yes, if you just listen to what I was saying to you earlier, that when we were at that time in March in Spain, a lot going on in Seville. We knew about it, but we heard more there than we did from England, which was a shame, really. And in actual fact, I thought when we would have got to the airport in Manchester that we would have been checked.
Yeah, no, I did hear what you said, and that was a surprise to me as well, that you weren't checked at Manchester Airport. And I've been doing phone-ins throughout the lockdown, and people have always said from the very beginning of the lockdown, it's shocking that we're not holding people up at airports as they're coming into the country, and we're not testing them. And so, it took a long time for that to register. But thank you for the call, by the way, Linda. Really appreciate it. We've got Margaret in Newport, and Margaret, you want to talk about the other main story that we've been talking about in this hour, which is about the obesity crisis in this country. The Prime Minister's hoping to launch something of a war against obesity later on today. And we've been asking, why is it that two-thirds of us in this country are obese or overweight? Any ideas?
Well, what I was going to talk about, Mike, because I don't know, I think it's a lot of diet and exercise, but really where you were asking about, is it more expensive to be healthy, right, to eat healthy food, right? Yeah. I don't really like saying from there, but I'm going to say it for the sake of people who might have the same thing. My daughter is waiting for a kidney transplant, right? And she had to come off the kidney transplant list earlier this year when lockdown came about. Oh, by the way, she never got the shielding letter she was supposed to have, right?
Whoa.
Yeah, that's another subject. Anyway, right, so she went, she had to lose weight to be able to go on the transplant list in the first place. So she was very good, and she went to sort of like diet classes and everything and lost all the weight and everything. So she was good at following diet. Anyway, she decided, right, when coming back onto the transplant list now recently, that she'd try a vegan diet. Now, this isn't being faddy. It's not, let's try being macrobiotic or vegan. Somebody told her that it might help, right? Because she's got really about 10% kidney function. Anyway, she went on and really low phosphate levels, and she's been on this vegan diet now for the last month, and all her levels have risen. She even had a letter from the hospital saying, well done, this vegan diet seems to work, which is absolutely fantastic. But it's cost a fortune.
Yeah.
All the products right? And some of them taste quite nice in the supermarket and everything that are strictly vegan. They cost like £1 more than anything else. It's really expensive, and she's got 2 little children. But it was worth it because of the actual, like I said, the hospital actually wrote to her and said, keep on this vegan diet. It's doing you good. But I mean, she can't get any. I mean, she works. We work. You know, we both work and everything. But it is worth it, and that's what I wanted to pass on to the listeners. If anybody's got a problem like that, but it actually has worked for her.
I can't thank you enough, you know, because we need people like you to tell us the stories of what works for them or their families in regards to all subjects, by the way. Do you remember the footballer Chris Smalling? I don't know if you're familiar with him. He used to play for Manchester United. He's gone to Italy now. And he revealed that his wife had convinced him to go vegan because she was vegan. And he said, actually, it's not just healthy, it improved his football somehow. I thought, amazing, we should all go vegan, but it's okay if you're a millionaire footballer to afford this stuff, isn't it? Yeah. And you say it's worth it.
And she does actually look like really glowing in health and everything, you know, and it's really, really good. She's got more vitality and everything. As I say, she didn't do it to be faddy.
No, sure.
You know, I can remember when I was younger that there was this macrobiotic thing and everything. But, you know, but it is, that's why I wanted to say I'm hesitant about talking about, you know, private things on air, but I just thought if there's anybody else out there that's just found out that, you know, that they've got this kidney problem, I mean, you find out quite quickly, but, you know, it is worth looking at. But there's so much stuff. Everything, like, it's called, not What's Cluck, with,
Margaret, sorry to cut you, only because we're coming to the top of the hour, but thank you. You're a saint, actually, because you're thinking of everybody else selflessly. Thank you. And after the news and sport, we'll come back and speak to Mohammed in Birmingham, a new caller, and Frank in Codisland as well. Lots to talk about. 08085 909 693 if you'd like to join us.
Smart speaker and online.
This is BBC Radio 5 Live.
BBC News at 2 o'clock. This is Adam Horsett. Officials in the Balearic and Canary Islands are trying to negotiate an exemption to new rules forcing British visitors to Spain to self-isolate for 14 days on their return. The Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab said the decision was necessary after a jump in cases on the Spanish mainland. The head of tourism in the Balearic Islands, Rosanna Murillo, insists the islands are safe.
We have taken strong measures to control the pandemic, and the numbers are showing it because our rate of cases per 100,000 people is currently at 8, whilst the UK one, I believe the last numbers reported were showing 14.6.
Rules coming into force in Wales today mean anyone over the age of 11 will now have to wear a face covering on public transport. The Welsh Government has so far resisted calls to also make them mandatory in shops and hospitals. The government is to set out details of its strategy to slim down the nation to reduce the risk from coronavirus. The measures will include a ban on junk food adverts on TV before 9 p.m. and an end to discounts on unhealthy foods. Angela Chesworth lost 10 stone through gastric band surgery. She says it isn't as simple as avoiding temptation.
I've lived with obesity since the age of 10. Every diet, every exercise regime, and I've lost weight, but I've then regained it, and that's because I'm a person who's living with obesity, and to me that means that there's something going on within my body that I can't control.
A microbiologist from Hong Kong who investigated the initial coronavirus cases in the Chinese city of Wuhan says local officials covered up the scale of the crisis. Professor Kwok Yong Yuen told the BBC's Panorama programme the authorities were slow to heed his warning about human-to-human transmission and removed evidence from a market thought to be at the centre of the outbreak.
When we went to the Huanan seafood market, of course there is nothing to see because the market was cleaned already. So you may say that the crime scene is already disturbed. We cannot identify the animal host, which is giving the virus to human.
China insists it's been open about the virus from the start. And you can see Panorama tonight at 7:30 on BBC One. A man in his 20s has been arrested on suspicion of murder after police say a woman was struck deliberately by a van in South London. Stella Frew, who was 38, is thought to have argued with the driver before the incident in Sutton on Friday evening. 5 people were taken to hospital after being caught in a rip current off Aberdyfi Beach in North Wales. A total of 8 people had to be pulled from the water. Portugal has been put on high alert as high temperatures have put much of the country at maximum risk of destructive forest fires. 850 firefighters are trying to extinguish one major fire in the centre of the country. BBC News, it's 3 minutes past 2.
BBC Sounds.
Hi everybody, I'm Joe Wicks and welcome to the Joe Wicks podcast.
Let's do this.
I'm going to be speaking to some of my favourite people who inspire me.
You're stretching yourself, taking yourself out of your comfort zone, and actually it almost turbocharges you.
And I'm going to find out what they do to keep their mental and physical health in check.
You don't have to do classical meditation. You have to find a thing that takes you to that place.
The Joe Wicks podcast.
I think you're going to learn things that you maybe wouldn't have expected, and it might really help you.
Listen now on the BBC Sounds app.
First for news and the best live sport. This is BBC 5 Live with Dotun Adebayo.
Yeah, and with all our late night listeners who join me on a regular basis 5 times a week here on BBC Radio 5 Live across the country on local radio, in Radio Scotland, BBC Radio Wales and BBC Radio Ulster as well. 08085 909 693 is our number to talk about some of the issues that concern us. I mean, it's a very special time, isn't it? Look at our top story tonight. Our top story is about the government deciding that people who go to Spain, returning home from Spain, will have to quarantine, for self-quarantine, 14 days. Now, you've heard the reaction. What's your story, though? Every call tells a story. How will that impact on you or your family? 08085 909 693. There will be some of you who think, well, hang on a second. This is a pandemic. They should quarantine for 14 days. Why? Why should people coming from Spain quarantine for 14 days? Several people have said, look, in those areas that holidaymakers go to, in Ibiza, for example, I've been speaking to the head of tourism there, and she said, look, we managed to conquer it here. Well, why are we included in this? Do you know what I mean? 08085 909 693. And if you love Spain and you go there as often as you can, whether on a package holiday or otherwise, tell me what's so great about Spain? Why are people prepared, do you think, maybe you, maybe others you know, why are people prepared to jeopardise not just their health, but the health of everybody else in the country, are going off to Spain and think that they can come back without quarantine? Explain that to me if you like. Also, I want to talk about the story that will be the headline story later on this Monday, when the Prime Minister reveals the government's plan to attack obesity. Apparently, when he was in hospital suffering from coronavirus as well, he changed his thinking on obesity. And we're all going to see what the outcome of that change of mind is. 08085 909 693. 2/3 of us, and this will include me, even though I've lost about 4 stone since the beginning, just under maybe, since the beginning of the coronavirus. Okay, I said that I'll tell you how. And literally, I've mentioned to you over the last couple of weeks, haven't I, that I was like in a war of attrition with a tree stump at the bottom of my garden. I tried everything else, tried chainsaw and everything. The only thing that was such hardwood, the only thing that worked was an axe. So I've been swinging an axe, literally swinging the axe, sometimes 8 hours a day, sometimes only half an hour a day. Well, you've got an excuse if it rains, don't you? But I've been swinging this axe, and I feel good, ba 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 ba. And my wife, well, she says, Chantilly lace and a pretty face I'll have on for you because you got a great body. Something like that. Not in the way that I sing it, because of course she's the queen of lovers rock. But can you afford to live a healthy lifestyle? 08085 909 693. Let's get straight to the callers. Mohammed in Birmingham, new caller to the programme. Great that you called as well. You want to talk about this obesity crisis. How would you describe yourself then? Would you describe yourself as obese or not?
I'm slightly obese. I should be below, I'm 84 kilograms, and I need to lose weight because I'm type 1 diabetic, and I'm 5 foot 8 inches, so I'll check my body mass index, my the health professionals say quit smoking, lose weight. They tell me what to eat. So I search on the internet, and on top comes up the NHS websites, NHS Choices, NHS website, and it says gym-free exercise, home exercise. It's really good, sitting down yoga, and lots of different things, like losing calories. Like a man's supposed to eat 2,500 calories, and a woman's supposed to eat 1,900 calories. And to lose weight, they need to eat 500 to 600 less. And that's what I've been doing. I'm losing weight. And you can't eat fatty foods or sugar. And it's easier. I'm on benefits, and, you know, it's not that expensive.
Hold on, hold that thought. You stay with us, Mohammed. I'm going to come back to you in just a moment or two, and thank you, because the advice that you've given now, a lot of people don't even know, and you've gone through it, and you've explained it to us. Hold that thought, because there'll be other suggestions on this. I want to speak to Frank in Coal Island. Is it Northern Ireland, Coal Island, Frank?
It is. That's where it is, Jim. It's up in the north, so it is on the shores of Loch Ness.
So what did you call me?
Did I call you Jim?
Yeah, it's not far away. It's not far away. Dotton, it's not far away from Jim, you know. You never know. But that's all right. I'm not Stephen Nolan. He's a good friend of mine, by the way.
Yes, but Stephen Nolan knows me anyway, so he does.
Oh, right, okay. Well,
but anyway, I myself now, I was 23.5 stone, right?
Wow.
Yes. And you see, if I tripped on the ground or had fallen over, I couldn't get up. Now, what I would say to your listeners is, the people that you know who are overweight and are trying their best to lose the weight, praise is a wonderful thing. It works wonders for people. And it's nice to do that for people. I was going to call you Jim there again.
That's all right, that's all right. Don't worry about it. So what did you say was a wonderful thing? I missed that.
What I did was praise.
Prayer?
Praise people. Say if a lady or a gentleman is overweight, what I was. Praise is a wonderful thing. Yeah. Just to say to them, you're doing well. I can see you're losing weight. That's brilliant. Wow. You know, just to praise them. And then take it from there then yourself. Give ourselves a bit of a shake and think well of yourself. Think well of yourself. Hold your head high and say to yourself, get a wee dairy is a great thing. And what I did was I planned my breakfast, my dinner, and my tea. Now, in between that, I would have had a cup of tea. Before this, I would have, say if I opened a box of buns, I would have ate the whole lot. And if I had been a cake, I would have done the same.
Well, why stop?
And the same in the afternoon, I would have done the same. And I was overeating, I was eating chocolate, all the wrong stuff. And what I had to sit myself down and do was, I had to cut the stuff out, was the buns, the cakes, and the chocolate. Now, whenever you get up in the morning, have a nice breakfast. I believe the breakfast is one of the most important meals for anybody to take in a day. I started to take a bowl of porridge and a wee taste of milk. I would have had a slice of toast and a mug of tea. And that was my breakfast. And then at 11 o'clock, I would have had a mug of tea, no sugar, wee taste of milk, semi-skimmed, and I would have eaten an apple. At dinner time, I would have had a small dinner, and I would have eaten then another apple or a pear. I liked apples, so I had an apple. And at 3 or 4 o'clock, I would have had a cup of tea, and I would have eaten an apple. And at tea time, I would have had a slice of toast, an apple, and I would have eaten nothing else in between that. And then say about 8 or 9 o'clock, I would have eaten a couple of plain biscuits with a cup of tea. And that done me that day. And that's how I did it. I planned it. And what I then, see, for the first week that I did it, I wouldn't have been fit to went anywhere for a walk because I was too heavy. Now, but the thing about it is, think well of yourself and say to yourself, right, I can do this. And believe you me, you will be fit to do it. And you don't have to go and tell anybody that you're doing this or you're doing that. But I would think it would be nice for people if they could see a person doing this and they're doing well at it, because praise works a wonderful thing. It's always nice to praise somebody. I always think it's a wonderful thing if you see somebody doing good, to praise them.
Absolutely, and it worked for you. It worked for you, as you said. And what I love about both you and Mohammed, who both called up, Mohammed in Birmingham, that I was speaking to a moment or two ago, and Frank, yourself in Coal Island. What I love is that, you know, I'm so proud of all my listeners, because genuinely you both called up to give other people advice about your challenges. Congratulations on going down to 13 stone from 23 stone, but I need to know, Frank, this is really important. I'm sure all our listeners are thinking, when you were 23 stones and you fell over, how did you get up?
I had to get people to lift up. I couldn't try to get two men. If I saw somebody, I'd have said, would you go and ask such and such, could they bring somebody with them and give me a lift up? I can't get myself off the ground.
Is that embarrassing?
And I'd have been rolling over, and I would have been trying to get up, and I couldn't do it. And I was depending on other people there to come and see them up, to help me to get up. But the people out there, there's some really nice people out there to help us. That's what I have seen, you know.
But you're amongst them. You're amongst them, Frank, because, you know, you have phoned up to help other people and to encourage them and give them the praise, as you talk about, to lose weight. Well done, and I salute you for that. And Mohammed in Birmingham too. Look, we're talking about this amongst other things because of the government's decision later today to instigate something of a war on obesity. The announcement of the Better Health campaign, as they're calling it, comes after warnings that excess weight can create a higher risk of severe illness from COVID-19. Some of the measures include a 12-week plan to help people lose weight, and also encouraging GPs to prescribe cycling to overweight patients, and also a ban on junk food TV adverts before 9 p.m. Look, I spoke earlier to the BBC health correspondent Richard Galpin.
Basically, they're launching a very big campaign to tackle obesity, and it includes a whole series of measures. It's a very long list, if you don't mind me going through it. But maybe I should just pick out some of the biggest ones. A ban on television advertisements before the 9 p.m. watershed. These are advertisements for junk food, i.e. sort of sugar, salty, fatty type foods. And also that would apply to online advertisements as well. An end of deals for the kind of buy one, get one type junk food which you can get from shops, and calories being displayed on menus when you eat out. So when you're in a restaurant, cafe, pub or whatever, that you can see how many calories that you are consuming. So those are some of the things which they're talking about. I mean, it's a very, very long list. And also this whole issue of coronavirus and obesity is within that.
Indeed, and a lot of these issues that you bring up now have been mooted over the past several years. I've done so many programmes about obesity in the UK, and people have, said, for example, the banning of junk food on TV advertising and, other issues that you mentioned there. Why now? Why has the government suddenly realised that this is a huge issue and they need to do something about it now?
Well, I think probably it is because of coronavirus and the fact that there seems to be a link that obese people have more serious illness if they get coronavirus than those with normal weight, and it increases not only illness but the risk of death. So I think that the fact you've got these things coming together, that the government has decided to come out with this campaign now. I mean, campaigns on all of this have been going on for a long time. There have been many, many campaigns in the past. and that, frankly, they have had very little impact. But the only one which seemed to have some impact was the sugar tax, but even that didn't really turn out fully in the way that people had been hoping for. But governments do regularly get onto this issue because it is such a huge, huge issue. I mean, 2/3 of adults in England are overweight or obese, so that the numbers are very, very large, and you get, as a result, thousands of people having to be admitted to hospital, which is, of course, a big strain on the NHS. So hence this campaign to get people healthier, fitter, and of course that involves losing weight.
Yeah, what I've heard, Richard, and I don't know how accurate this is that the Prime Minister's experience in intensive care during his treatment for COVID-19 is thought to have contributed to him changing his position on obesity. Is there any truth in that?
I think it is likely, and certainly it's a major turnaround for him, because in the past he's kind of said, no, it's ridiculous, nanny state, we shouldn't be telling people what they should be eating or drinking, that's entirely up to them. But he does seem to have had this complete change of heart. And I think, of course, we can't be sure, but I think there is a possibility that this was, exactly as you say, as a result of his experience with coronavirus, and the fact it was worse because he was obese, he was overweight, and that makes things much more complicated. And as I was saying, I mean, it obviously increases the risk not only of of greater illness, but of death, which for him, obviously, it was in some ways, he had a very, very difficult time with coronavirus. He was clearly very, very ill.
There is a lot of pressure in society on people who are obese. Over the last few years of covering this story, I've heard everything from people calling up the radio program and saying, look, obese people, they're responsible for their own plight in a way, and that they should pay, for example, for their own treatment on the NHS. There are all sorts of issues, like the arguments about smoking. Not least on women, but...
Итак, на этом я заканчиваю. Спасибо всем, кто смотрел, слушал, а также обонял и осязал. Сегодня я говорил мало, вернее, практически совсем не говорил, о чем я предупреждал в самом начале. Я думаю, в следующий раз будет какой-нибудь душещипательный рассказ. Этой ночью мне хотелось помолчать и послушать радио. Возможно, в следующий раз будет пободрее. В любом случае, спасибо и пока-пока.